It was the year 1987. When my parents first came to the USA, we were very poor and living in Fresno, California at that time. My dad found a job at a warehouse where he walks 4 miles to work every day. He is a loving dad and the best dad in the world. He works so hard to put food on the table. I remember my dad coming home one day crying in the kitchen because while walking on the way home he got beat up by some gangster and stole his wallet. As a kid, I was so mad but couldn't do anything but just watch my mom comfort him. One time, he was walking home from work when a dog chased him and bit my dad on the leg. He will still have to wake up early in the morning to go to work, even though he can't walk much. My mom and I always watch my dad walk off to work, but this time I was crying inside because my dad was walking crippled to work. I always think to myself that I will become a doctor one day and will earn a lot of money so I can support my family. On the weekend, my dad will always gather all my siblings together and talk to us about life. If one day something happens to him, we have to look over each other and treat each other kindly. It was one hot summer day. We were waiting for my dad to come from work so we could celebrate my mom's early birthday together. My mother and I waited for my father on the street until late at night, and we became concerned. My mom took me home and went to a neighbor's apartment to see if they could give my mom a ride to my dad's workplace. It was late, so all my brothers and sisters were already asleep. I waited in the living room and couldn't sleep because I was worried about my dad, and he usually never comes home this late. As I was watching TV in the living room, I saw someone in the kitchen sitting in the dining area. I looked closely, and it was my dad. I was so confused because if he came home, I would hear it since the door was next to the couch that I was sitting on. I walked to my dad and asked him why he came home so late, and he told me that he had to work overtime. But the worrying thing is that he won't turn around to look at me and is always facing back at me, but I just shrugged it off. He then got up and walked slowly to our room, where my brother and sister slept. I followed him and saw that he touched everyone's heads one by one, like he was leaving somewhere. I ignored it and went to watch TV in the living room. I saw him coming out of the room, but his face was facing the other direction. He approaches but faces the other direction, touching my head and face. His hands are freezing cold. He told me to be a good boy, to watch over my younger sibling, and that he needed to go somewhere. So I thought he was going to my mom to let her know that he was home. So I shook my head and continued watching TV. He opened the door and walked off. Around 30 minutes later, my mom came home crying, and to my surprise, all my cousins showed up out of nowhere. And it was so late, so I was confused. I saw my mom crying loudly around the house and just kept calling my dad's name. One of my uncles pulled me to the side and explained to me that on the way to work, my dad got beat up by some bad people while walking to work. The police said they kicked my dad's head so many times and stole his wallet again. He died early in the morning. My heart dropped and I was about to faint because I had just seen my dad and he had just left. But when my mom heard about what I saw, my mom cried even harder. So my uncle told me to stop talking about it. Day by day, I stayed with my mother, but she is not the same anymore. Sometimes she talks to herself, which she never does. On the funeral day, I sat next to the coffin in tears. Seeing my dad bruised on his face and neck makes me want to go and look for those bastards and kill them all. But I was only a kid at the time, and those were just angry thoughts of mine. Fast forward to a year later, my mom's stress is becoming worse. Every day we stood by her side, but she is not the same anymore. She died 2 years later. All my brothers and sisters went to live with my uncle. That is just a story of mine from a long time ago. I am now 45 years old and live in St. Paul, Minnesota. Thinking about the night my dad came into the house that night gives me chills, but I know that my dad missed us all and his spirit came home to visit us for one last time before he went. Thinking about my life when we first moved to the United States still gives me tears in my eyes. I was a security guard, and one day I was assigned to watch the parking lot of a business. Upon arriving, I noticed that there was a cemetery right across the street. I didn't mind it because it was not the first time I've been assigned to a place close to a cemetery. So I just shrugged my shoulders and went on to my duty. The parking lot was too big to wander around on foot, so I had to drive around it every certain time or so. During the first week, nothing out of the ordinary happened. It was a breeze. One night, after I finished my round and didn't see anything, I went back to my parking spot and lay there using my phone. I was so tired that I told myself I'd just close my eyes and take a quick nap because I'd been here for a while, and nothing had happened. So I assumed nothing else would happen while I slept. I'm not sure how much time had passed, but I suddenly woke up to a noise akin to someone knocking on my window. I jumped up because I thought maybe it was my boss who had caught me sleeping on the job. I became fully alert and looked around, but I didn't see anything. I cleared my eyes and then looked around again, but only silence awaited me. Outside, there was nothing at all, except for the waving shadows of the few trees around me. The parking lot was dimly lit, making it hard to see too far, so I took out my flashlight to scan the surroundings. Still nothing. I came to the conclusion that I heard the noise while I was just dreaming and mistook it for reality. I leaned back in my seat and started touching my phone again. Then there it was, that knocking sound again, this time from the back window. I quickly whipped my head back, but there was nothing there. I slowly reached out for my flashlight and put my hand on the power button, getting ready to turn it on at any sudden noise. I was on full alert now, and I could feel my goosebumps showing up. I tried to force my heartbeat to slow down because it was so loud that I was somehow afraid what was out there could also hear it too, and it would give away my exact position in the car. After listening for what seemed to be an eternity, my mind could finally think logically. So the first thing that came to my mind was that maybe it was not a ghost out there, but an unwanted stranger trying to break into cars. I looked out slowly, and when I didn't see anything, I opened the door and stepped outside to investigate. I slowly walked around my car to see if there was any damage, but there wasn't. I walked around a few other cars as well, but I saw nothing out of the ordinary. I turned back to walk to my car, and I suddenly stopped and my heart quickened so fast I felt a slight dizziness. I looked at the inside of my car, and I could have sworn I saw someone sitting in the driver's seat, with her back turned towards me. I rubbed my eyes and looked at it again, but I could still see someone sitting there. She still had her back turned, so all I could see was her hair. I pointed my light at her and walked very slowly towards her. When I got near the car, through the flashlight, I saw a bump in the middle of her back. I wasn't sure what it was since her hair was covering it. I walked even closer, and when I got very close, I suddenly saw what the bump was. It was a nose, and since I was so close to the window, I could also see a pair of eyes looking at me through the hair. It was at this point that I just turned around and ran the heck away, into the business, where there were still a couple of people staying overnight. I just made up an excuse to stay, and then when my shift was over, I went home, called my boss, and told him to switch me to a different location. I do not want to go there again, and I do not want to wonder what it was that I saw that night. I was driving somewhere, but I was very tired from the lack of sleep the night before, so I parked my car in front of a high school and fell asleep. After a while, I suddenly woke up, but I couldn't move my body. I also felt uneasy because I could sense something was off. I listened carefully, but all I only heard was cars going by, making humming sounds. I couldn't put my finger on it, but there was a nagging feeling in the back of my head. Suddenly, I realized what the problem was. It was not cars going by, but it sounded like people are running, making whispering sounds as they ran by my car. After a bit, Everything went dead quiet. It was so quiet, to the point of it being chilly. I could hear my heart beating if I listened carefully. The weird thing is that it felt so cold that I could also faintly see my breath as I exhale. This is not normal because it was usually hot at this time of the year. Then, I felt an old man crying outside. I couldn't move at all, but I could see that it was dark already. I also realized that the sound of the crying was coming nearer and nearer, and it was the sound of grieving, when people are crying at a funeral. When he came close to my car, I could hear clearly what he was crying about. I might forgot the exact words, but this is the gist of what he was saying. He was repeatedly grieving. Why do I miss you so much? Where have you gone? Why, in a blink of an eye, are we already like this? Then when he was exactly right in front of my window on my side, he slowly said in a crying tone,
Son, do you see my wife? Tell me.
He kept repeating that to me, but I couldn't turn my head to look at him because when I opened my eyes, I could only see straight ahead and could only see a silhouette at the corner of my eye. After a few moments, he began tapping my window to get my attention. But when I didn't move at all, he started turning away, cried for a bit, then walked away, crying the same thing. It was only when he was gone then could I move. I jumped up and looked around my car, but didn't see anything. I quickly realized also that the sun was still up. It was still daytime. To this day, I still wonder what would happen if I could move my body and turn to look at his eyes.